The medium-sized daily driver is by far the most popular class of ship flown in the verse today. After much anticipation, Robert Space Industries has put their name into the hat to become your daily driver. As someone who has flown a Cutlass Black and then a Spirit C1 for years, it is time to take note. With top-of-the-line redundancy, scanners for the perils of pyro, and the fan-favorite Dorito design, this is the RSI Zeus ES. Hello folks, Space Tech here, and welcome to a ship review and buyer's guide for the Zeus ES. With the competitors like the Cutlass Black, Freelancer, and the Spirit series, I find that the Zeus punches above its size class, having larger guns, a better component loadout, and an absurd amount of polish. This ship is extremely exciting, but there are a couple considerations that really make me hesitant to recommend this to everyone. With that in mind, has the ES done enough to earn your upgrade? If you've been to my channel before, you know that I'm all about the details, so feel free to jump around to sections that interest you the most. If I helped you make up your mind by the end, a like and subscribe is always appreciated. Starting off with the tour, the sides of this ship strongly and squarely remind you of other ships like the Star Destroyer. They also have wingtips that will fold up when landing. While the Spirits have been the most beautiful ship in the verse thus far, I think that the Zeus has easily taken that crown now. Unfortunately, this small silhouette does mean that the Zeus will not have the atmospheric performance of ships like the Spirit once control surfaces are implemented. In addition, the fuel scoop rates of the Zeus are nothing to write home about either. Unlike origin ships like the 400i or even some other exploration ships like the Aquila, the Zeus is pretty much middle of the road. Coming to the front of the ship, we see a cockpit extremely reminiscent of the Constellation and the Scorpius. Unfortunately, it has inherited similar struts as the Constellation, but will not be nearly as bad due to the smaller overall size of the ship, as well as missing the middle strut that would have otherwise completely blocked your view when looking forward. This brings us to the back. Here we have 4 large RSI thrusters around the rear ramp of the ship. Similar to most ships of this size, we see 2 fuel ports on this ship. One of these will be used to refuel from ships like the Starfarer, whereas the other will be used to refuel by vehicles or personnel on the ground. These could be at places like the remote outposts around Pyro, or when it's parked on carriers like the Kraken. Hitting this button on the right side folds down the ramp while giving us access to the most polished interiors out of any of the ships in the verse today. As we walk through it, pay attention to how much they've managed to fit into the relatively small footprint of the Zeus. Right off the bat, we're flanked by the components of the ship. The left side has access to a size 2 cooler, size 2 power plant, a battery, and finally a relay. Keep these relay locations in mind, as they'll be vital to the survival through the engineering of this ship. On the right side, we have another cooler, power plant, and our size 2 quantum drive. Note the jump drive slotted in right above the quantum drive. I really like the fact that duplicate components are not grouped up on the same side. This makes it less likely for those components to get damaged together by penetrating rounds or fires aboard the ship. This preservation of redundant components will be vital for ships as engineering comes online. Further into the cargo hold, we have our size 3 radar on the right, which is a size bigger than any other ship in this class. There's also a glass panel showing off the massive fuel tanks unique to the ES variant of the Zeus. The left side only holds a fire extinguisher. While this cargo room is not nearly as large as the one on the Zeus CL, you can still store 32 SEU of cargo in a 4x4x2 grid in the center of the room. This means that you cannot store a 32 SEU crate in the back, and so you'll have to play around with your cargo configuration to make sure everything fits and you maximize the space available to you. This does end up as the least amount of SEU compared to the 46 on the Cutlass Black and the 64 on the Spirit C1. Of course, no daily driver would be complete without the ability to carry some ground vehicles, and so inside the Zeus, you should be able to carry more than enough bikes, several STVs, a couple Cyclones, a Fury, and that's it. Unfortunately, this is where the Zeus falls behind ships like the Freelancer Max or of course the Constellation. The Zeus is unable to carry an Ursa rover without shooting its wheels off. While this wasn't a big deal before, the introduction of the respawn-capable NERSA has completely changed that equation. Ships that can get you back into the fight at a distribution center or at a bunker mission are incredibly useful, especially as daily drivers. While the Cutlasses, Spirits, and base Freelancers cannot carry an Ursa either, this does firmly place the Freelancer Max or a Connie above this ship, if bunker running is important to you, that is. Keep in mind, the ES has been sold as an exploration ship, so any exploration that you have to do on foot just got that much more dangerous. Moving into the next section brings us to Habitation. On the left side, we have our barracks where we can find a bench, 3 lockers, and 3 bunk beds for everyone on board that will also serve as escape pods once that functionality is implemented. Interestingly, you can set the lighting of each of the bunks individually, so you can let your crew know whenever you're having a personal emergency of some sort. We also have a shelf in place of the fourth bed, but I do wish that this had been kept a bed instead, just in case you wanted to take an extra passenger for a ride. Just past this, we have the infamous shower-toilet combo. It seems as though RSI has once again chosen to use seashells instead of providing the owners with toilet paper. You also have the ability to set the bathroom into red alert, just in case you find yourself in a truly sticky situation. Across the hall is the kitchen, complete with cooking appliances and a table to enjoy your meal. We have a few closed shelf spaces that may eventually be used to store perishable food, and most importantly, it has my number one desired feature in any ship of any size: windows. Far too often, we can find ourselves sitting outside of the cockpit of our ship, completely unable to appreciate the beauties of the cities and nebulas around us. Sitting here with our burritos and our Zeus, we can take it all in as we unwind and explore the verse. While some people don't really care much for living amenities, I think their importance cannot be overstated for a daily driver specifically. This is a ship you are going to spend hours in every single time you play. A moment to sit in the kitchen to gather your thoughts adds a lot to the experience of an immersion-focused game like Star Citizen. Beyond immersion, I would not be surprised to see amenities play a vital role in keeping NPC crew happy, effective, and fed, especially on long trips like the kind of expeditions that you'd be taking in an Explorer like the Zeus ES. Back out in the hallway, we have a weapon rack to store a couple of long arms, small weapons, or tools. I appreciate their placement outside of the cargo hold, unlike the Zeus CL, so you would be able to access these weapons to defend yourself from those who may try boarding your ship from the cargo hold. Up these stairs, we find ourselves in our official engineering and utility section. On the right, we have two size 2 shield generators, our gravity generator, and another battery. We also have another relay as well as our engineering console that will be vital to keep the ship functional as it sustains damage to its components. Opposite these components, we have another fire extinguisher as well as the biggest reason to upgrade from a C1, a ladder leading directly to the ground outside of the ship, just one door away from the pilot's seat. Up ahead, we have yet another exit route, the docking port that will be great when boarding from another ship, or when you want to exit the ship without locking yourself into the ladder animation. Finally, we have the suit lockers. CIG has told us many times in the past that you will not be able to fit every seat wearing every kind of suit or armor. You will, for example, have to take off heavy armor to fit into pilot seats. These suit lockers are extra useful in exploration-focused ships because you will have to change into armor that best suits the location that you're exploring. The Novikov and Pembroke suits that we have in game today for very hot or very cold weather are a great example. Finally, we have reached our cockpit. We have our last set of components here, a well-placed shield generator, our critical life support, and our avionics system. We also have one final weapon rack to carry your last-ditch effort weapons in the case you're getting attacked by boarders, and this is the last room that is safe. Up front, we have a final fire extinguisher and a wonderful demonstration of CIG's polish with a window to the missiles under the floor. Then, our 3 pilot's chairs. All things considered, I don't think the view that you get from the pilot's chair is unacceptable even given the struts on the side. You still get a fairly good view out the front, and I would still prefer this view to the one that you get through the mailbox slit that you have on the Freelancer series. The other seats don't have the best of views either, but they will largely be focused on scanning or maintaining internal ship systems, so that isn't a very important drawback for the ship's function. Speaking of which, a daily driver doesn't need to be the very best at everything, but you should be able to take on smaller combat missions and defend yourself from attackers. So what kind of weaponry does the Zeus ES have? The pilot of the ES has access to 2 size 4 weapons. The Spirits, Cutlasses, and Freelancers all have smaller but double the number of guns. While the larger weapons of the Zeus will have better penetration against armored ships, the other competitors end up with much higher DPS, especially against would-be attackers that will likely be in lightly armored fighters anyway. To give you a little bit more DPS, you also have a remote turret equipped with a pair of size 3 weapons on the underside of the ship. This isn't a lot of extra damage, but it gives you a lot more coverage behind and underneath the ship. Underneath especially is a blind spot for all of the other competitors of the Zeus. Finally, you also get access to 8 size 2 missiles, which is my personal sweet spot for size and number of missiles to deal with light fighters. This isn't nearly as much as you can find on a Cutlass Black, but it is comparable with the Spirit and Freelancer series. One downside is that the Zeus missile racks are custom and bespoke, so they will not be able to be replaced with other size missiles. All of the DPS in the world, however, isn't worth much if your hull is made of paper. So how much durability does the Zeus have? The Zeus comes with 4 size 2 shields. This is 1 more than a Freelancer and 4 times as much shielding as a Cutlass or a Spirit. This is also 1 more shield than the rest of the Zeus series. All in all, you're looking at an effectively top-of-the-line shielding across its class, the major downside being the relatively small hull HP pool. This amount of shielding, however, makes the intention clear that the Zeus ES is intended to be able to recover from light attacks. This is further reinforced by the fact that the Zeus has a minuscule silhouette from the front and the side. Even its top-down profile is way smaller than a Spirit, meaning it's going to be a lot harder to land your shots on it. Even if they do manage to penetrate your hull, the Zeus has several redundant components, like multiple power plants and multiple coolers, that will allow your ship to keep moving, even if it loses a couple components. The final durability consideration that I will be including with all of my ship reviews going forward is the engineering layout. This ship has a pretty fantastic layout in my opinion. They have spread out redundant components as well as they can, having a centralized engineering station and a fire extinguisher in every single room. Life support is also located right next to the pilots, which is the most secure spot to defend in case of boarding action. You do have 2 relays to manage, however, one of which is located all the way in the back, so that is something to keep in mind, as it would be quite the run for a solo pilot to go back and forth between the pilot's seat and the very back of the ship. Of course, not getting hit at all is the best form of durability, and your maneuverability is a big part of your offense and defense. With a pitch, yaw, and roll of 32.5, 32.5, and 110 degrees per second, the Zeus ES turns about as well as the Freelancer Max, but a fair few degrees slower than the C1, and especially the Cutlass Black. So should you buy the Zeus ES? For exploration, the Zeus makes about as much sense as something like the 400i. I'll be making a full video comparing the 2 ships in the future, but they trade blows across their features. I will say, however, that until we know more about what the gameplay looks like, I will not be buying anything more than a cheap CCU to the ships that interest me under the exploration umbrella. If we were to expand that scope a little, I think the Constellation Aquila is probably your best bet if you know that you're going to be traveling with a couple of companions. As it stands today, the Aquila is rather large for a single person to be able to pilot as well as manage the engineering systems. The more interesting conversation, in my opinion, is about daily drivers. This ship joins a fantastic daily driver lineup beside the Cutlass Black and the Spirit C1. Each of these ships has their own advantage, from the cargo of the C1 to the combat of the Cutlass Black. The Zeus ES brings with it an enormous fuel tank and better components across the board. Something that can't be measured on any stat sheet, however, is how a ship makes you feel day in and day out using it. The ladder on board the Zeus, for example, would be that difference maker for me when choosing between this and the C1. The windows and better use of space are just the cherries on top. Unfortunately for the Zeus ES, the newly released Zeus CL shares pretty much all of the same upsides while carrying around an absurd 128 SCU of cargo on top of that with barely any drawbacks. It also comes in more heavily armored. I have a full video about the Zeus CL linked below that goes into more detail, but I struggle to find a reason that you should pick the Zeus ES over its CL counterpart. If you believe that the extra shield or a larger radar and fuel tank would be worth it for you, then you aren't making the wrong decision by getting the ES, but for what it's worth, I myself will be dailing a Zeus CL going forward. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.